Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 297. Which Wurmple's Which? The episode begins with Max, May, and Brock sleeping in the Pokemon Center after arriving there the night before. Because if you remember from last episode, Trico was still in the Pokemon Center, so they were staying there while Trico was there. However, as we see Max, May, and Brock all in separate bunks sleeping, we see that Ash was already gone, with just his stuff being in the room, along with Brock's bag. May was the first to wake up this morning, and she noticed that Ash was gone, so she woke up Max and Brock, alerting them to this. As she did some stretches to wake herself up. Upon hearing May call out for him and Brock, Max woke up and put on his glasses, leading May to ask Max where Ash was, leading Max to point over to Ash's bed, not understanding fully that he was gone, so he was shocked when he noticed that Ash was in fact absent from his bed. Hearing both May and Max, Brock, despite being in a deep sleep, woke up and heard about the situation, not believing it, so he leaned down from his top bunk and saw that yes, Ash was gone, so he declared that he, May, and Max should go find Ash. Eventually, May, Max, and Brock, after getting dressed, did find Ash, who was sleeping with Pikachu on a bench near Trico's recovery room. May asked what Ash was doing out here, leading Ash to reveal that Tailo had to be healed at the Pokemon Center as well, so he decided that he would wait outside on the bench to be closer to Trico and Tailo while they recovered. May then turned her attention to Trico's health, asking how it was doing, leading Ash to admit that he must have fallen asleep for several hours, so he needed to go check on it, but was confident Trico would be okay, because it was okay all of last night, for the most part. Thankfully, Nurse Joy walked by just as Ash went to the ER window to examine Trico through it, so Ash asked her how Trico was doing, and thankfully, Nurse Joy confirmed that Trico was doing fine, and it would be well enough to not have to stay on the nursing table it was currently on. Now all Ash had to do was wait for Trico to wake up. Ash then asks about Tailo as well, who wasn't in the ER, but just getting healed at the front counter inside of its Pokeball, and Nurse Joy confirms that Tailo was okay too. And Nurse Joy confirmed this, so Ash went into the main lobby of the Pokemon Center with his friends to wait for both Tailo and Trico to wake up, and eventually they did, and Nurse Joy recalled Trico into its Pokeball and called Ash up to the counter and gave him back Tailo and Trico's Pokeballs because they were all recovered. Ash thanks her for all her help, and then releases his Trico and Tailo out of the Pokeballs and apologizes for pushing them so hard, but adds that he was proud of them for doing the best that they could, and both Tailo and Trico showed their forgiveness towards Ash, still respecting him as a trainer, because they knew that he was probably just out of it that day, and they also knew that Ash was just so hell-bent on winning, because he wanted to show Brawly that he should focus more on battling and actually being a gym leader, as opposed to surfing at the time. And Ash thanked them for being so understanding. Anyways, with Tailo and Trico now healed, Ash and the gang had breakfast at the Pokemon Center, sitting at a table, as they ate some sandwiches, and vegetables, and tea, and all that shit. And Tailo and Torchic were eating from the same Pokemon food bowl, as were Trico and Pikachu, whereas Wurmple had its own bowl entirely. And despite having its own bowl, it was actually the first one to finish in a very short time, so May poured some more Pokemon food into its bowl, but it just finished that extremely quickly as well, and went to sleep, likely tired from all the food. Upon seeing this, Ash joked that Wurmple had quite a goddamn appetite, like holy fuck, but also pointed out that it wasn't very active, and just liked to sleep, with Brock agreeing, and adding that that's all it seemed to do was eat and sleep, and compared it to his Fortress, who just liked to sleep a lot of the time, but didn't eat, as that's why it wasn't out of its Pokeball eating right now, because it rarely ate. May was well aware of her Wurmple's lifestyle, but she just found it cute, and that's all that she cared about. Anyways, the conversation at the breakfast table then turned to Ash's training, with Ash stating that he was going to start training here on Dewford Island immediately after breakfast, and asked Brock where he thought that he should train, leading Brock to state that anywhere on the island would be fine for Ash to train, so long as he took Brawly's advice and trained in nature. Max, who wasn't at the breakfast table currently, came up and interrupted Ash and Brock's conversation, stating that he had just heard from someone in the Pokemon Center that Stephen Stone, the son of Mr. Stone, the president of the Devon Corporation, was doing some secret research, and this really intrigued Ash, as he remembered Kennedy from the Devon Corporation saying that Mr. Stone's son was very, very strong, so he wanted to go meet Mr. Stone's son to battle him. So Ash asked where exactly Mr. Stone's son Stephen was located, leading Max to reveal that he had also heard that Stephen was currently in Granite Cave looking for some rare stones, which were apparently his study subjects. So Ash and the gang made their way to Granite Cave on Dewford Island, and on the way there, Brock looked in his guidebook to learn some shit about Granite Cave, and heard that it was supposed to be very dark, and that a lot of trainers training to battle at the Dewford Gym like to train in the Granite Cave. Just then, before they actually reached the cave, they came across an old man sitting on a rock, who, unbeknownst to them at the time, was actually James from Team Rocket in disguise. James gets their attention by calling them over, and explains that there was a lot of water Pokemon in this area, and he knew the ideal spot to catch them by fishing, as he proceeded to rant and rant and rant about how some of the rarest and strongest water Pokemon in the world were apparently found right there, and offered Ash and the gang some rods to fish before they even said anything. Ash was hesitant to make a pit stop to fish, since he really wanted to get some training in by going to Granite Cave and battling Steven. But May and Max really wanted to fish for these rare water Pokemon, and Brock simply reminded Ash of Dolly's advice that even playing could be training, so long as you were involved in nature, and fishing was definitely being involved in nature, and also added that they wouldn't have to fish for long, just a little while, and they could just head to Granite Cave after this. So Ash was convinced, and they all started fishing, stopping at a nearby incline that was by the cave. Meanwhile, in some bushes nearby, Jessie and Meowth had been watching James and were proud of him for not unveiling his disguise, and were happy that their plan was going so well. What was their plan? Well, we'd find out soon enough. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, May instantly complained when she started fishing and wasn't getting anything instantly, but Brock advised her to just relax and wait. That was the name of the game with fishing, after all. I'm sure Misty would have said the same thing. And I don't know about that, maybe she would have gotten impatient, but anyways, Ash decided to release Trico, and advised that it should relax as well, and enjoy the sunshine and nature, possibly hoping that if Ash was training in nature, then he should have his Pokemon train in nature as well, to make them stronger, even if the training was just relaxing, as Trico stuck its twig in its mouth and lied down. Just then, May shrieked in excitement, as she remarked that she had actually got something on her hook. Since May had never fished before, Max tried to give May some advice on how to properly reel it in, and tried to help her, but May shook him off, stating that she was the older sibling, so she didn't need any help from Max, and also added that she was old enough to know how to fish, even though she didn't know, but somehow she was able to actually catch something, being an octillery, as she pulled it up. However, the octillery grabbed on to her face, giving Ash the opportunity to scan octillery with his Pokedex, because it had been a decent amount of time since he'd seen one. May angrily asked how the fuck she could get octillery off her face, leading Brock to suggest that she battled the octillery to both get it off and weaken it so that she could capture it. So May decides to send out her Wurmple to battle it. Just as she sent out Wurmple, the octillery lashed off of her face, giving May the opportunity to scan octillery with her Pokedex, but then octillery suddenly jumped onto Max's face. Although octillery was tighter on Max, to the point that it was using Constrict on his face. May just stood there in shock, leading Ash to remind May to attack, so she had Wurmple use String Shot. The String Shot did manage to get octillery off of Max's face as it jumped off to dodge the attack, but as a result, the String Shot landed on Max's head. May didn't care about this, as she simply just tried to have Wurmple tackle the octillery, but the octillery escaped back into the ocean, bouncing off of Max's face, headbutting him to do so it could get an extra boost. Max, bitter about the octillery incident, made fun of May for letting the octillery get away, with May bitterly replying that she didn't mean to, embarrassed. Ash and the gang then resumed fishing, and it was Ash this time who caught something, being a Pokemon he had never seen before, a Hoenmon Corphish. He obviously took the time to scan it with his Pokedex, but while this was going on, the Corphish clamped onto Max's head, pinching him with Vice Grip. Max then screamed in pain as the Corphish made its way from his head to his ass and Vice Gripped his ass. As Max proceeded to complain how all the Pokemon they were catching seemed to be clinging to him, Ash sent Pikachu to battle Corphish, and Pikachu did manage to scare Corphish off of Max and make it start running away, but it only ran towards May, leading May to selfishly pull Max in front of her, so that if Corphish were to try and Vice Grip her, it would end up just Vice Gripping Max again instead. But at the last second, Corphish, worried that Pikachu was still following it or trying to attack it, changed direction and headed for Trico instead, and Trico obviously didn't want to get Vice Gripped either, so it jumped up, making Corphish miss it. And Pikachu then caught up to Corphish, and Ash instructed Pikachu to attack Corphish with a Thunderbolt, but before Pikachu could do so, Corphish struck first with a Crab Hammer on Pikachu, knocking Pikachu back as Trico caught Pikachu with its tail. However, with Pikachu knocked back, this gave Corphish the opportunity to escape back into the water, diving in and leaving Ash depressed. But May and Brock comforted him, saying that he may get another chance if they continued fishing, which they did. Meanwhile, James had returned to Jessie and Meowth, and Team Rocket had now rebuilt their Magikarp sub and were spying on Ash and the gang from the water. It was then revealed that the plan to have James disguise himself as an old man and get Ash and the gang to fish was all Jessie's idea. And while Team Rocket was excited that that part of their plan had worked, since now Ash and the gang were fishing, James and Meowth were getting bored, as they were merely just sitting, watching, and doing nothing, and suggested that they should just kibosh this whole maneuver and just try and go for a Pikachu, basically just wing it. Jessie admitted that her plan wasn't perfect, as now that Ash and the gang were fishing, they were getting several catches that they were failing to actually catch, but she was mad that they were at least getting the chance to capture these water Pokemon. But regardless, she simply told James and Meowth to be patient, stating that her plan would be worth it, as she went on to brag about how awesome it was and explained it. Essentially, Jessie's plan was to have Ash and the gang accidentally catch their rods on Team Rocket's Magikarp sub, and then Team Rocket would drive the sub down and pull Ash and the gang into the water. And then, once Ash and the gang were in the water, this would cause their Pokeballs to fall off of their belts or out of their bags, so Team Rocket could scoop them up, and also scoop up a Pikachu that would be too tired to fight back, as it would almost be drowning due to not being able to swim very well. Jessie got very excited at her plan, and began to talk about all the things she could do with all of Ash and the gang's Pokemon, but James advised her to calm down, as did Meowth, telling her that she shouldn't get too cocky, and that they should just focus on actually making the plan work, as opposed to daydreaming. Jessie was a little annoyed at this, but only got more annoyed when Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of its Pokeball, forcing Jessie to recall it. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang who were fishing, May suddenly felt a tug on her rod again, and unbeknownst to her, she had actually managed to hook on the Magikarp sub, although she just thought that she had hooked a really big fish, as when she was pulling, she was almost thrown over the edge. So, Ash, Brock, and Max all helped her reel, lending their strength. Pikachu even joined in as well, but it was still too much for Ash and the gang to pull in, as they were really struggling. As for Team Rocket's reaction to this, they smiled, laughing, because the next phase of the plan was now complete. They had been hooked. And they then proceeded to pedal extremely hard in their sub in an attempt to make Ash and the gang fall down into the water, diving deeper and deeper and deeper to do so. Because essentially, the farther down the Magikarp sub was, the more likely it was that May was going to be pulled into the water. But she refused to fall in, as did Ash, Brock, and Max, as they simply applied more force necessary. And much to Team Rocket's annoyance, the tug-of-war that was occurring between them and Ash and the gang caused the pedals of the Magikarp sub to break, meaning that Team Rocket couldn't resist anymore, and May, Brock, Ash, and Max, with their combined strength, were able to pull the Magikarp sub to the surface. Max got excited, exclaiming that May caught a super rare, huge Magikarp, but it was unfortunately of course revealed that this was of course just Team Rocket's Magikarp sub, as they hopped out of their sub and did their motto. Jessie then began to angrily rant about how her plan got fucked up, and how it wasn't supposed to go down like this, as she explained her failed plan of getting Ash and the gang's Pokeballs when they fell into the water. And she and James begged Ash and the gang to have some sympathy for their failed plan, and simply just give them their Pokeballs, though Meowth informed them that Ash and the gang would definitely not do this. Jessie and James saw Meowth was right, so Jessie declared that they would just have to steal the old-fashioned way, as Team Rocket jumped from their Magikarp sub onto the incline that Ash and the gang were on, and James threw out a net to capture Pikachu inside. Pikachu tried to escape the net by using Thunderbolt, but Team Rocket just laughed, as like usual, the net was shock-proof. So Ash then instructed his Trico to use Quick Attack, which was able to knock James to the ground, causing him to drop Pikachu's net, which broke the net, freeing Pikachu. This makes Meowth angry, as he extends his claws out and threatens to steal every single one of Ash and the gang's Pokemon himself, demanding that they hand them over, or he would scratch them and knock them out. May's Wurmple, which was still out of its Pokeball, was then picked up by May, as she hugged it tightly and informed Meowth that he would not be allowed to have her Wurmple, or any of the Pokemon for that matter. Upon seeing May's Wurmple, Jessie just laughed, stating that she didn't want her pathetic Wurmple when she had one of her own, which was a lot better, as she then released her Wurmple and grabbed hers herself and began to cuddle it. May simply argued back that her Wurmple was better than Jessie's, but Jessie retorted this, and it just led to a massive argument of May and Jessie arguing about whose Wurmple was better, with May saying her Wurmple was a lot bigger and stronger than Jessie's, and Jessie saying that hers was bigger, but also much cuter than May's. Ash, Brock, Max, James, and Meowth were very annoyed by the two girls yelling, and Max was so annoyed that he jumped in between Jessie and May and stated that he could settle the goddamn argument, as he began to measure both Pokemon's lengths and came to the conclusion that they were equal in size. And to prove this, he closely examines both of the Wurmple with a magnifying glass, examining their height as well. And his hypothesis was confirmed. The Wurmple were in fact of equal size. However, Jessie was annoyed by this, and refuses to believe that a mere height and length test could prove which Wurmple was better, and she decided to have her Wurmple battle May and hers, so that basically she could prove that her Wurmple was better by defeating May's. So she had her Wurmple use String Shot, which just barely misses both May and her Wurmple, and this makes May angry, as she tells her Wurmple to use String Shot, which hits Jessie right in the face. As Max, Brock, and Ash were distracted watching this battle between Jessie and May and their Wurmple, James saw an opportunity to try and catch all the Pokemon again by throwing out another net, so he pulled out a net and was just about to throw it. But Trico saw this, so he spit his twig on James's hand, causing James to drop the net and the net to be destroyed. While this was going on, both of the Wurmple were still using String Shots on each other, and just barely missing Jessie and May. Ash was then alerted to Trico having knocked James over, having heard James collapse, and he saw that Meowth was trying to fight against Trico as revenge now, so Ash told Trico to use a Quick Attack on Meowth, sending him flying, and knocking him out as he landed straight on both May and Jessie's Wurmples. So Jessie and May run up to Meowth and grab their Wurmple from underneath Meowth. Although unbeknownst to them at the time, proving that their Wurmple really were identical, they had each picked up the wrong Wurmple, so basically May had picked up Jessie's, and Jessie had picked up May's. Jessie, not wanting to risk her Wurmple getting hurt again, decided that a retreat was in order, as she went back to the Magikarp sub, grabbing the knocked out Meowth and taking him as well, as James followed. However, before Team Rocket could actually go into their Magikarp sub, Pikachu used Thunderbolt to destroy their sub and send them blasting off. With Team Rocket gone, May hugged her Wurmple and cheered, happy that it was safe, but her Wurmple didn't seem happy to be with her, obviously because it wasn't her Wurmple but Jessie's, and this led May to think that something was up, so she fed the Wurmple a huge bowl of Pokemon food. But as soon as she put the bowl in front of the Wurmple, expecting it to scarf it down, as her Wurmple usually did, the Wurmple didn't even take one bite. May began to get worried, thinking that this Wurmple wasn't her own, so when Ash, Max, and Brock asked May why she appeared so distressed, she informed them that the Wurmple wasn't eating anything, and was therefore acting very weird, and it also just didn't seem that happy to be around her, claiming that she could just sense something was wrong with her Wurmple. This led Brock to suggest that May check if the Wurmple was really hers by recalling it into its Pokeball, because if the Wurmple wasn't hers, then it obviously would not go back in. So May obliged, pulling out Wurmple's Pokeball, and sure enough, the Wurmple did not return to the Pokeball, just as May had suspected. May, Brock, and Ash then questioned how the fuck May had ended up with a different Wurmple, leading Max to realize that Jessie and May's Wurmples must have been switched when Meowth landed on them. Ash and the gang began to worry, stressing about not being able to find Team Rocket, and therefore not being able to get May's Wurmple back, but May was determined to give Jessie's back to her and get hers back, promising that she would do so. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had blasted off somewhere into the nearby woods, and James was extremely annoyed at failing to capture Ash and the gang's Pokemon again. Although Meowth tried to comfort James, suggesting that they could just come up with a new plan like they always did and try again. As for Jessie, she was happy, as she commended what she believed was her Wurmple, even though it was May's, on its epic string shot, stating that because of how good the string shot was, the Wurmple had proved that it was better than May's. James then pulled out some cookies and offered the bag to Jessie and Meowth as well, so that they could get refueled before coming up with a new plan. But much to Team Rocket's shock and horror, the Wurmple, obviously due to it being May's and loving food, ate all the cookies straight out of James' hand before he could give them to anyone, or eat any himself. James and Meowth then got even more shocked, as right after this, the Wurmple, of course, just curled up and went to sleep, as May's usually did, with James commenting that this was extremely fucking weird, as Jessie's Wurmple never did this. However, Jessie just claimed that her Wurmple must have just had a huge appetite today and was tired, nothing out of the ordinary. However, James was adamant that something was off about the Wurmple, believing that it might not be Jessie's. Meowth thought that something was off about the Wurmple as well, but he just thought that it was maybe because Jessie wasn't feeding Wurmple well, so the second it saw food, it just had to eat it. Jessie was distraught at the thought that she may have been unknowingly neglecting her Wurmple and not feeding it enough, so she tried to apologize to it by asking for a hug, and complimenting Wurmple on how cute and awesome it was. The Wurmple was woken up by Jessie's yelling, but instead of going to Jessie to show affection towards her, it went up to James and showed affection towards him, shocking James, since Jessie's Wurmple had never showed any affection towards him, and came to the conclusion that this had to be a different Wurmple. Jessie still refused to believe this, but knowing the Wurmple didn't show any affection towards her, she wanted to know for sure if the Wurmple was really hers. So she asked Meowth to ask the Wurmple who it belonged to and have Meowth translate, although all the Wurmple said when Meowth asked it was that it was still hungry, which Meowth translated, pissing Jessie off. And Jessie only got more pissed off, as Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of its Pokeball, forcing Jessie to recall it. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were looking for May's Wurmple through several bushes, and when they weren't able to find anything, Ash decided to send out his Tailo and have it do an aerial search around the area for Wurmple. As Ash and the gang followed Tailo, May began to have flashbacks of her experience with Wurmple, sad about it being taken by Team Rocket. She had flashbacks of the day she first met Wurmple, and when she was startled by it, but remembered how it eventually grew on her, and with Torchic's help, she was able to catch the Wurmple. As she also recalled her many memories of Wurmple sleeping and eating. She got so worried that she wouldn't get Wurmple back, not knowing what she would do without it, that she began to cry, declaring that she had to get it back since it was her first Pokemon that she officially caught. Unfortunately, when Ash called out to Tailo, asking if it had spotted anything yet, Tailo replied that it had, shaking its head. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was still in the bushes, and since Wurmple hadn't given a direct answer, Jessie was still in denial about the Wurmple not being hers, and she began to hug it, trying to get it to warm up to her again, thinking that maybe something was just up with Wurmple's mood today. So, Jessie continued to hug it, and tried to remind it about the time when Jessie first caught it, and tried to incentivize who she still believed to be her Wurmple to warm up to her again by telling it that they would win many cute Pokemon contests together, as she envisioned herself with the Wurmple winning one of these contests as they showed off together in a flowery field with Jessie in a big dress. James and Meowth, however, knew that Jessie wasn't even talking to her Wurmple, so that's why it wouldn't warm up to her, and they tried to inform Jessie of this, but Jessie still wouldn't listen, adamant that this Wurmple was hers, as she continued to hug it and fantasize about winning contests with it. However, this fantasizing was interrupted as Tailo had managed to locate Team Rocket flying over them, so it went back to Ash and the gang and reported to them that it had found Team Rocket with May's Wurmple. So, Ash and the gang followed Tailo back to Team Rocket, where they were in the woods. Jessie bitterly questions why Ash and the gang were here, and tells them to go the fuck away, explaining that she was trying to bond with her Wurmple. However, May then reveals that there had been a switch between the two Wurmples, and stated that she had come to exchange Jessie's Wurmple that she had back for her own. Jessie still refused to believe that the Wurmple had been switched. However, when May mentioned how her Wurmple always liked to eat and sleep, Jessie finally believed May, and agreed to exchange the Wurmple. And they also agreed to exchange their Wurmple at the exact same time, so that neither of them could try and make it off with both Wurmple. But, of course, Jessie immediately betrayed this agreement, and had May give her Wurmple back, and then began to run off with James and Meowth with both of the Wurmple. Great. May chases after Jessie and tries to retrieve her Wurmple, but she ends up tripping, allowing Team Rocket to run away and get far. However, Ash, Max, and Brock join the chase, and May quickly gets up and chases after them again. But unfortunately, Team Rocket made it to their Meowth balloon and begin to fly away, with Jessie taunting that she was going to give May's Wurmple to Giovanni, and she was going to keep her own for herself. However, James questioned why Giovanni would even want a Wurmple anyways. This led Meowth and Jessie to begin having a boss fantasy, with Meowth suggesting that Giovanni could use the string from Wurmple's string shot to sew ripped clothing. As Jesse and Meowth visualized this, fantasizing, their fantasy was cut off as Ash then commanded his Tailo to use a wing attack on the Meowth balloon to pop it and send it plummeting down into the trees below and causing Team Rocket and the two Wurmple to fall out of the Meowth balloon, dazed. With Team Rocket down, May runs up to them while they were knocked out and takes the opportunity to retrieve her Wurmple. However, Jessie soon gets up, determined to not let May take her Wurmple back as she sends out her Seviper and orders it to attack May and take her Wurmple back. However, Ash interferes as he commands Tailo to use Quick Attack on Seviper, although Seviper counters with Haze to block Tailo's view and prevent it from reaching Seviper. This leads Ash to send in his Trico instead, and he has it use Pound to hit Seviper, which was successful. However, James then decides to help out Seviper by sending out his Cacnea and ordering it to use Pin Missile, although before the Pin Missile could get off, Cacnea, of course, hugged James, prickling him with his spines. With Cacnea and James distracted, Ash decided to send out his Pikachu to help out Trico as well, but then Cacnea finally actually used Pin Missile, although Pikachu was able to dodge. As for Seviper and Trico, Seviper used Poison Tail, but Trico was able to jump and dodge this, and then hit Seviper with another Pound attack. Then, Pikachu uses a Quick Attack to attack Cacnea, and Seviper ends up getting thrown into Jessie from Trico's Pound attack, and the Quick Attack was enough to throw Cacnea into James. So, Team Rocket was knocked over as their Pokemon were hit into them, and then they were sent blasting off by Pikachu's Thunderbolt. While blasting off, James and Meowth were complaining about being blasted off like they usually did, but Jessie was happy as she hugged her Wurmple, happy to have at least hers back. As for Ash and the gang, they were happy as well, as they cheered at the fact that Team Rocket was blasted off, and May was extremely happy to have her Wurmple back, as she then gave it a huge bowl of Pokemon food, which, just like usual, it quickly devoured and fell asleep. Very happy to be reunited with May, because May always provided it with food. Ash then stated his amazement at the fact that May was able to tell immediately that the Wurmple that she had earlier, Jessie's Wurmple, wasn't her Wurmple, and asked how May was able to do this, suggesting that May must really like Wurmple if she could tell it apart from other Wurmple. However, May simply replied that she could just sense that something was off with it, and she wasn't quite sure as to how she was able to tell. This leads Brock to state that if May truly could sense if her Wurmple was hers, then that must mean that she truly did have an immensely strong bond with Wurmple, explaining that if a trainer had a strong bond with their Pokemon, then they could sense a whole bunch of stuff regarding it. Max and Ash agreed with Brock, stating that if May truly was bonding with her Pokemon now, then she was becoming a way better trainer. May then thanked her Wurmple for this, believing that she was only able to bond with Wurmple, as well as become an even better battler with it, because Wurmple was so fucking awesome. The episode then ends with May picking up Wurmple and hugging it as we see a final scene of the sun setting on Dewford Island. Yay!